This is live. No, now this is live. I never know exactly what's going to happen when I press the live button, but aloha to all of you. Aloha mai kako. My name is Ka'ala Souza, and I'm with the Workforce Development Council and doing a WDC live stream today. Very, very, very excited to have this with you guys. One of the reasons we even started doing this is because as part of our Workforce Resiliency Initiative, I've been speaking to I've been talking a lot, which is normal, but I've been talking to a lot of people, and these people are sharing some fantastic insights. And I thought, is there some way that we can share this with everybody who needs to know this, right? So there's a lot of things we can be aware of. We can anticipate. We can look into the future a little bit and get some crystal balls and just get some perspective and start to change how we think a little bit bigger sometimes for our state, for ourselves, and for our family. And so that's what we're doing. This live stream is all about. If you have any comments, questions, please feel free to drop them down in the YouTube live chat section. Also, welcome if you're here watching this live or you are watching this later in the recording. Whatever it is, please like and subscribe. It helps us out, helps get the word out. And so today, I think that's kind of part of my introduction. I want to introduce you to somebody I've been speaking to a lot over this last 12 months or so. He's a part of the WDC board and super, super smart guy. And I want to share with you a little bit of who this is. Today we're talking to Jason Bradshaw. And here's a funny thing, even before we go on to this, I misspelled ILWU. How can you do that? Some of you guys are like, this is straight Souza. Who would misspell ILWU? Anyway, that's not ILUW. He works for the ILWU as a Hawaii legislative representative. And I want to read this whole thing out to you. And I don't normally, but I like it. He says, Jason is the current legislative government affairs representative for the ILWU Local 142, which represents workers in tourism, longshore, agriculture, and general trades. In his role, Jason advocates for working families and economic justice. Before working for ILWU, Jason was the political director for the Hawaii State AFL-CIO and worked for Senator Inouye in Washington, D.C., when Senator Inouye was the chair of the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. Jason was born and raised in Hawaii, and is a proud graduate of Hawaii's public schools. Graduating from Kalaheo High School, he went on to get his degree in political science at Northern Arizona University. So if you're out there and you feel like cheering and clapping your hands, please do, and welcome with me, Jason Bradshaw. Aloha.
Hey, aloha, and thank you for that wonderful introduction, Ka'ala, and go Mustangs. And yes, I am. I'm very glad to be able to be a product of the public school systems in Hawaii, and I was very happy to be able to attend Kalaheo High School. So, actually, when I was there at Kalaheo High School, I was part of the track and cross country team and was one of the captains of the track team for Kalaheo.
Right
so it was a good experience. Yeah.
Represent, man. Legit.
Yeah.
I saw that in your bio. I mean, there's some great things inside there, right? You're the legislative guy, the government representative for ILWU, which is already legit cred. And then you're talking about Senator Inouye,
small kind.
Wait, Washington D.C. with Senator Inouye,
Yeah.
And then right there, the holding down the foundation is Kalaheo. Go Mustangs. And just so happens,
Yes.
I live right down the street from Kalaheo High School, and so I have known tons of people from that, and they're all super smart, like you.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. Fantastic. Hey, so today we're going to be talking a little bit about your perspective on things here in Hawaii. We're going live right now, so if any of you are watching this live, feel free to drop in any questions. It's almost like a focus group where people message me and I feed this in. So I'm going to be the facilitator on this. But I really wanted to get you on to a live stream so we can share some of your perspective and the way that your brain thinks and the way that your mind works with the rest of the state.
Oh, are we sure about that now?
I've always left all of our conversations over this last year, as we're talking about the workforce and training and upskilling and where Hawaii is going to be in diversification, all these things. Every time I leave a meeting with you, I feel like I've just learned that much more. So I want to share that with everybody else, and super excited to have you.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to be here. Really am.
Great.
I am.
Hey,
Thank
so
you.
real quick, I know you're already repping Kalaheo High School. How did you get from Kalaheo to working for Senator Inouye in Washington, D.C.? Can you give me like the 1 minute, minute and a half version of that whole pathway?
Well, yeah, I guess, Kalaheo High School. And then I was interested in politics. So, applied at various schools on the West Coast, particularly the Western Undergraduate Exchange, WUI, because they allowed for close to in-state tuition for Hawaii residents. So I got accepted to NAU, attended NAU, trying to get my degree there in political science. But while I was there, I applied to actually intern for Senator Akaka in Washington, D.C., and was fortunate enough to get accepted. So my summer of my junior year, I spent 3 months in Washington, D.C., staying actually at American University, interning for Senator Akaka. So then when I graduated from Northern Arizona University with my degree in political science, I came back home to Hawaii and actually worked on Senator Akaka's campaign when Ed Case challenged him for the U.S. Senate. For me, fortunately, Senator Akaka won. And after that campaign was over, I was offered a job to go work in Washington, D.C. for Senator Inouye, but for his committee, which he was the chair of the Commerce, Science, and Transportation at that time. So I worked for the committee in the Russell Building. Margaret Comiskey was the director of the committee at that time. And it was a great experience to be able to work in Washington, D.C.
Fantastic. And again, you say that you've always been interested in political things. Did you grow up in a political family? I mean, was there a teacher at Kalaheo that brought this out of you, or what happened?
No, political family. I grew up in a union household. My father, Bucky Bradshaw, who some people in Hawaii know, actually was the president business manager of the Hawaii Sheet Metal Workers Union at the time. So for me, we were always discussing politics. We were always discussing workers and unions in my household, and it just became a passion of mine. And that's something that I wanted to be able to work on when I got my degree in political science.
Oh, awesome. It makes sense to me. Like sometimes I'm having conversations with my kids and I wish I was more political. It's only recently, the last couple of years, I start paying attention, and I'm super far behind the times. Maybe, which is why when I'm talking to you, it really helps me to just kind of get a grasp of some of the big picture things. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about today, looking at Hawaii. I mean, obviously, what is this? It's April 19th. How did I forget? It's my wife's birthday today. I didn't forget that. She's not watching. I hope she's not watching. Not? No. I hope so. She may be. Yeah. But it's April 19th, 2021. And so, we're looking at almost a year, or maybe a little over a year, March, April, where, COVID-19 has changed our world. So what I'm really interested in you and what you're thinking is kind of the big picture, and then drill it down into what we can do going forward, towards the end of this live stream. But first question for you, and again, you can ask me questions too. So we're just talking story. Okay. Though I should have asked you what year you grad from high school. You
probably don't want to know. No.
You're gonna make me feel old. Is that what it is?
I feel young. No, I graduated in high school. I graduated 2002.
2002. Whenever people start lead with the 2000.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, right?
So I was in the 20th century, the late 1900s.
That's still fine.
Yeah, we won't even talk about that. But I do want to talk about this, Hawaii, and I didn't prep you on these questions, so sorry, I should have probably sent you a list. But I want to know where you're at, optimistic, pessimistic about the future here in Hawaii, just in general. And it's one of the questions I ask a lot in focus groups and facilitation, just to get kind of the vibe of where you're thinking. Are you positive going forward? Are you kind of feeling optimistic? Are you feeling more pessimistic? Where are you on that continuum?
I think that's a great question. And if you heard from me when we talked privately initially a few months back, and actually a couple of times, you probably heard from me a lot of pessimism, right? I was concerned with the direction we were heading because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I still am a little concerned, but let me kind of mention it. So I think there's some optimism and pessimism, a combination of both. And I see myself on the screen. Is that what I'm supposed to see?
Sorry, yeah, that's good.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. I apologize. So
I can put me back on.
Where are we at? There we go. So you asked, are we pessimistic or optimistic about where we're heading? And so let's take a look at what happened. the COVID-19 pandemic hit, as we all know, and almost 600,000 unemployment claims were filed in the state of Hawaii in that year of 2020. That is a significant portion of Hawaii's workforce population. Now, it wasn't 600,000 workers that actually filed, but it was probably hundreds of thousands of workers, and almost everyone in the hospitality industry at some point in 2020 lost their job, whether temporarily or permanently, and a lot of them actually ended up being permanent. At that time, things started to look pretty grim. And why did we say that? And because I get this, the whole seeing myself. Is it possible we can get back to seeing you, Kyle?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm seeing myself, and it's just like, wow.
I like looking at you, though. You're talking. I'm sorry. For those of you who are watching online here live, sorry, my bad.
Yeah. No, sorry about that. And so we had a situation in Hawaii where we lost about 600,000, well, 400,000 to 500,000 jobs, 600,000 unemployment claims that were filed. And people were struggling, and people are struggling in the state of Hawaii. And so we weren't sure, or at least for me, myself, I wasn't sure which direction we would be getting out of this in the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was a concern. And so we look at the hotel industry in the state of Hawaii today, and well, at least today now, it looks a lot better than it did, say, 3 or 4 months ago. We actually finally have tourism coming back into Hawaii, even though we're not quite there at the vaccine passport yet. But the thing about the hotel, hospitality, tourism industry is, I'll lose my train of thought. Sorry here, Colin.
No.
But the thing about the hospitality tourism industry is we got to look at the big picture. Do we look at just numbers, bringing in as many possible tourists as we can in Hawaii and hoping that is the solution, or do we look at more of like a little bit more of a different approach where we bring in fewer tourism numbers, but we're looking at like the higher end aspect of Hawaii, right? So we don't have such a huge amount of tourists coming into Hawaii. But the main point I'm trying to get at here is that we have a situation. Can we take a moment?
Sure. Yeah. And you just stop for a second and let me talk, because I can talk nonstop.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'm hearing from you is that we, like even back in the day when I first was asking you about this, because we're looking at the future of work, what does Hawaii look like? And you're telling me things like, kind of the stuff you're saying now, but there's some challenges going forward ahead of us. I mean, with the people who are unemployed, that rent, the cancellation of things where nobody has to pay rent, is going to be due, or mortgages, and then that all coming due. And I think there was kind of a gloomy future. If I were to ask you that then, how pessimistic or optimistic were you? I think you'd have been leaning more towards the pessimistic side. And it sounds like you're a little bit more optimistic, which I'm interested in.
Well, no, and I apologize for what happened there. But no, so we still actually have a situation. We have a housing crisis, and let's be honest with that, right? So we have a lot of workers. We still have about 9-10% unemployment rate in the state of Hawaii. We're still looking at anywhere between 80 to 100,000 possible workers without a job in the state of Hawaii. Maybe it's a little bit lower. It's just obviously there's long-term unemployment in Hawaii that's not calculated in that 9 or 10% figure. And so we've had this housing moratorium or rent moratorium in the state of Hawaii that's been going on now for about 12, 13, 14 months now, since the pandemic basically started in March, and now we're already in April heading into May, and it's been extended until June, this moratorium eviction. What we're going to be facing eventually at some point for a lot of these workers is after about 12, 13, 14 months of not making payments, at some point the moratorium is going to get lifted. And workers, whoever they may be, that haven't been able to make their payment on rent, it's going to come to a point where they're going to end up facing a sizable chunk that they're going to have to owe in the housing rent that they currently are living in, whether that's $10,000, $20,000, whatever the number is going to be. And many of these workers are not going to be able to afford that. So we are going to be facing a crisis in the housing market. Even if this economy improves, which it is slowly improving now, we're still going to be facing a crisis with that housing market. So the question is going to be, as policy experts, whether it's on the national level, whether it's on the state level, or whether it's on the county level, is how do we help the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people who are struggling to be able to make rent, struggling to be able to pay their mortgage or just housing alone in general. The situation we have, if we take a look at Hawaii as a service sector economy, right? And so the majority of the workforce in Hawaii is in the service sector economy or in the state or federal government type of jobs, right? Because those are the two biggest employers really in the state of Hawaii. But the service sector economy, even though we're starting to do better, and I'm glad that we're doing better. I mean, I'm glad to see that, you know, people want to visit Hawaii, and that's pretty remarkable. Even though they have to take their test, and they got to still spend that $100 or $200 to get the test, they still possibly might have to go into quarantine. At least during the spring break period, and even currently now, we're starting to see the massive amounts of tourism coming to the islands, whether it's on Oahu and specifically on Maui, which I think is a good thing, because what we're seeing now is workers are starting to get brought back to the hotels. They're starting to get brought back to the service industry that they were working in, the restaurant industry, wherever it might be. And that's a good thing. And so workers are starting to get called back. They're starting to get employed. They're starting to get their health insurance again. Because what happened too is, as we know in Hawaii and the rest of the country, you have health insurance if you're employed. If you're not employed, you don't have health insurance. That's just the way it works in the United States. And so a lot of these workers, unfortunately, were without health insurance. And so, or they had to get health insurance in the private sector side. I mean, when they were out of work, they had to get it by themselves. And that's expensive. For some healthcare plans for individuals, you're looking at $300-400 for an individual plan, maybe $500. For family plans, you're looking at over $1,000. And these are bills that a lot of these workers didn't have to experience when they were employed because their employer was offering health insurance. But getting back to where we are in the service sector economy, you know, the problem we have here is they're good jobs. People should be happy that they're working, but they're not the best paying jobs, Ka'ala. And that's a situation that I think we have to realize here in the state of Hawaii is, you know, you might be making $15 an hour, $20 an hour, $25 an hour. You're looking at $35,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year, whether you're working in the restaurant industry, whether you're working in the hotel industry. Actually, in some restaurants, you might be making as low as $25,000 or $30,000 a year.
Right.
And that simply doesn't work in the state of Hawaii, the type of income that these workers are receiving. Single-family homes on Oahu had hit $950,000.
Saw that.
On the neighbor islands, it's in the very similar price range. $900,000 to $1 million is what you're looking at for a single-family home. Condos are anywhere between $500,000 to $600,000 or more. I think we all know at $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000 a year, no one is going to be able to buy a condo or a single-family home in the state of Hawaii. And even when it comes to rent, you're looking at a month or more for some of these rental properties. And even that is almost impossible. So we have a situation in our hands where we have to look at what do we do with our economy? I mean, and I bring that up because I'm not even sure we all know the answer to that yet, right? But we do know that tourism is the type of economy that works in Hawaii. We happen to be a state that people want to attend, right? They want to visit. They want to come here. We have great climate. We have good beaches. We have great scenery, good golf courses, you know, and it's relatively safe. So people come to Hawaii because they want to visit, they want to be able to travel here. They want to experience the culture. They want to experience the state. And that's a good thing. But so that probably means we're not going to be escaping tourism or those type of jobs. So then what do we do to be able to ensure that these workers or their families that are in these type of industry are going to be able to succeed and be able to stay in Hawaii and be able to afford Hawaii? Because right now, many of them cannot afford Hawaii.
Yeah. And this is the thing that now you've just led me into this thing, and I'm hoping that you have this great answer for that, because like we're doing this computer upskilling, right, for the WDC, trying to get everybody leveled up, give them some computer skills, look at remote work opportunities, but is that going to be enough? And, one of the things that we tell people is that we're not trying to give you computer training, though we are. We're trying to, give you opportunities to live the dream here in Hawaii, which is essentially to live in Hawaii without having to work 20 jobs. So you've set me up just to ask you this. Is there, even though I know you say nobody knows, and I think that's true because I haven't heard any real, definitive directions or vision that anybody could possibly know. It's like the unknown and unknowable future. But is there a light at the end of this tunnel that says that if we do this and this and this, or maybe try this, that we can have people who have jobs here in Hawaii, who maybe just one job, that could pay the bills, that could possibly get that rent or a mortgage? Give me some hope here.
Well, yeah, I think that takes a lot of people together to figure out what that type of economy is going to look like, and to try to figure out, like, what do we want Hawaii to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or 50 years from now? If we don't change the course we're on in Hawaii, we're going to look a lot different than we do now. We already look different today than we did 10 or 20 years ago, right?
Right.
I mean, what's happening is, and I don't like to see it. I don't like to see local families. I don't like to see our friends and family that are born and raised in Hawaii, and then they're telling us they have no choice but they have to move to California or Las Vegas or somewhere on the mainland, because that's where it's more affordable. That's where the job opportunities are. Right. And so that's what's happening. We see a lot of local families having no choice but to move to the mainland because that's where they can succeed, at least as of right now. And then on the other hand, we have other people moving into Hawaii, whether it's investment properties, second homes. And so Hawaii looks a little different. So so it's going to be the question is, what can we do for local families in Hawaii to be able to keep them in Hawaii? Well, one, obviously, clearly, we need more affordable housing, but that's not an easy solution either, right? And to figure out how we're going to get can be very complicated. But when we talked just a minute ago, $950,000 for a single family home, and let's be honest, in some neighborhoods, that's on the relatively cheap side, especially from the side that we live on, the windward side, Kailua, or Kaneohe, where those homes are going to be $1.5 million, $2 million. And
they're small.
Some of them, they're just average homes. They're average homes, yes, for that type of price. So we keep telling everyone, and this is where I think workforce development is great. And I think this is something that you've been hitting on. And I think something that will be helpful for the workforce is, we're always telling everyone, if you go to college, get your degree, you're going to succeed, right? Mm-hmm. And but that maybe is not always the case. It would depend obviously on what you're going to get your degree in. It's going to depend on what you want your job to look like in the future. But I think it's going to be important that we start advocating and promoting more vocational education, right? We have some opportunities for some very good paying jobs in Hawaii that people can make $80,000, $100,000 a year or more in the state of Hawaii. If you want to go into, for example, the construction industry, you want to become a carpenter or an operating engineer, a plumber, an iron worker, sheet metal, you name it. Those type of workers can make $30, $40, or $50 an hour, but not everybody wants to do that work. And even at that hourly pay that you make, oftentimes they still can't afford the homes that they even build in the state of Hawaii.
That's right.
And that is a problem as well, too.
The thing is, I would want that personally, but you don't want me to do construction. I have zero construction skills. I wish I could. I wish I could, do carpentry. We have April from the carpenters train. She's the head trainer for carpentry here in Hawaii, and she's on this week too. We're talking to her about how carpentry is going to look, the kind of skills that you need, and she's telling me even in my mind of what carpentry looks like, you lay out a big blueprint, or somebody's building a house or a building or whatever it is. And she goes, no. We have everything is digital right now. You have to, you basically have to live like digitally to be able to work digitally here. It's a whole different set of skills. Oh, shucks. I think I lost you. You just kind of froze. Unless you have this great.
No, I'm still here.
Okay, good.
No. Oh, sorry. No, go on. I'm sorry. What did you mention?
No. I was just talking about like having these digital skills. You have these jobs that could get $100,000, but even then, you're right. It's so hard to just pay the bills. We're still feeling almost like living paycheck to paycheck. My wife and I are part-time on Molokai, and milk over there, the last time we were there, was something like $9, almost $10 a gallon. So it's just like just paying bills. And even if you have a good job, it's a tough one.
$80,000 a year is paycheck to paycheck in Hawaii, right? But
say that again.
But many places in the mainland, it is. I mean, and it's the truth, and that's what hurts. But again, we get back to what can Hawaii look like? And that's the situation that I think many of us have to try to figure out. You're not going to turn the tourism hotel industry into $100,000 a year jobs overnight. That's simply not going to work either, right? And so it's going to be a matter of trying to figure out a combination of, can we get housing? Can we make cost of living a little bit more affordable in Hawaii? And then can we figure out a way to where workers are going to get better wages in their jobs? And I think if we could all figure that out, we'd fix the problem, right? But
I think that's all you got to do, Jess. Yeah. I think my jiu-jitsu coach told me that, hey, all you have to do is turn this way and then you'll be free. I'm like, oh, that's all. Just do that.
Yeah.
So when you start talking about like this idea of what Hawaii can look like, I think that's what I'm talking vision. This is what vision is, this alternative picture of the future. Yeah. And that's leadership to me. Like this, we're here now. This is where you are here. You want to be here. And it's a future state. So who needs to be at this table talking about this to be able to address this for our community, our family, 10 years from now? Is there people already doing this?
I think there's people doing it, but I think people are talking about it. I don't think everyone is always at the same table discussing it. You need employers at the table. You should have unions at the table. You should have workers at the table. Right. It's always great to get the workers' perspective as well, too, right? I think that's very important. It's not just hearing from the manager or the boss as well, right? Hearing from the workers' perspective is, I think, always important. But this is something maybe the Workforce Development Council can help to try to take a lead on, right? Is setting up these task forces or these groups, right, and getting people together to figure out what the direction of Hawaii should look like. But we talk about that, but we're going to get back to it's. And I mean, whether this is good or bad, Ka'ala, we're always going to probably be a tourism state, just because, like I mentioned before, our awesome climate, our beaches, the sort of exotic experience when you're still, though, in the United States, right? So there's these things that people find attractive about Hawaii. So then we're just going to have to figure out a way, how do we make that work where it's going to work for local families? They can still work in that industry, but be able to survive and succeed in the state of Hawaii. Obviously, some workers can go into the construction industry, and that's great. We talk about trying to diversify our economy. We had about a year to take a look at diversifying our economy. And honestly, during this pandemic, it was a wake-up call for us to realize maybe we shouldn't be so reliant on the hospitality tourism industry, because we saw basically overnight, pretty much everyone lost their job because the state had to close down. And so you had the option for policymakers and for businesses and workers and all of us to come together to figure out what can Hawaii look like in 2021, 2022, and 10 years down the road. I think the problem is everybody comes back to the realization we can't escape tourism. And so then the question is going to be what is tourism going to look like in Hawaii down the road? And we try to mention, like, it could look like a luxury model where maybe you have, the situation where the hotels are a little bit more expensive. You get a higher clientele coming to Hawaii. It's going to be fewer tourists coming to Hawaii, but more, right? And so they're actually going to be spending in the economy. But that might also mean less of a workforce, which is not helpful either, because you're not going to be catering to as many people. So people have talked about that as a possibility of what Hawaii could look like, kind of like maybe the Tahiti approach to some degree. But we also talk about, let's expand agriculture in the state of Hawaii and maybe start working on that situation. Maybe we're growing more avocados or pineapple or bananas or papaya or whatever it might be. But let's also got to be honest with ourselves. Though that type of jobs are not going to equate to the number of tourism hospitality jobs that currently exist today. So, a hotel can employ 1,000 people, some of the big hotels, right? But one of these farms is not going to be employing 1,000 people, right? And so where do those other jobs go then? And so we talk about, maybe we can become a tech industry hub. Now with Zoom and with this capability that we're doing today with each other, talking on the computer, being able to not have to, a lot of remote work. You don't have to be in the office maybe that's a possibility, but we still don't have that as an option yet in the state of Hawaii, being a tech hub for some of these bigger corporations, whether it's a Google or an Apple or an Amazon or Microsoft. I mean, I think they're comfortable where they're at now, but maybe that's something that's worth exploring. And obviously in the tech industry, those are high paying, good paying jobs. But, you know, we don't have too many of them available here in Hawaii, at least at this time. And of course, we don't really have manufacturing in Hawaii. That's probably never going to exist just because of the cost of being able to transport things. You know, we have to, you know, either go by plane or boat in Hawaii if you're going to export, right? So that gets a little bit more costly versus somewhere on the mainland, you know, go all by train or by truck or whatever it might be.
Exactly. You know, we're working at the WDC with collaborating with DBED, Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism, on remote work opportunities for people here in Hawaii. You know, we're doing some pilot programs, Instant Teams, it's the Remote Ready Hawaii, flexjobs.com, you know, but all of those still require some basic computer skills just to get on. And it's not bringing like a big giant tech company like you talked about here into Hawaii. It's actually keeping people in Hawaii, but working around the world, you know, and this is an interesting thing. I think in Hawaii, we've never had to go and compete without having home court advantage. You know, we've always had Diamond Head. We've always had the pretty beaches that you talk about, you know, the weather. And now, you know, the world is just a different place and people are still going to come to us. But for us to fill these thousands and thousands of jobs that you're talking about, we're going to have to go out. And so we're not going to have, you know, Diamond Head, home court advantage. I've been talking about like Max Holloway, you know, like he's never had a UFC fight here in Hawaii. And I don't know if this is a good metaphor or not for people, but it's kind of like we have to go and compete outside in the rest of the world with Bangladesh and, you know, Kenya, Taiwan, India, all these different places, not just the other 49 states. So, I mean, do you think there's a possibility in that? Can we get enough remote work jobs? Not bringing the big tech jobs in. I mean, what are you thinking? Is that possible for us to get thousands of people here in Hawaii working remotely for companies or organizations around the world?
Well, I think remote work is definitely possible. We have the capability of doing it, and we have the technology that allows to do it. But you asked, do we want to bring them here? I don't think we're necessarily want other people come here. We got to figure out what's going to work for our local workforce.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, I'm talking about getting residents here, jobs out there.
Yes, it's definitely possible as long as these employers are offering remote work capability. I think, you know, but we have to make sure our workforce gets educated and trained for that, right? And that's going to be, I think, something that's important, whether it's WDC that can provide the training or whether it's a school or college they attend. I mean, I think that it doesn't, like you said, remote work, the great thing about that is it doesn't matter where you live. And as long as that location has a high-speed internet, which of course Hawaii has, we'd be able to do that. It's just making sure that these employers have no problem with remote work hiring, regardless of where you live.
Yeah.
But it's going to come down to training, though. It's definitely going to come down to training.
Thanks for walking right into my project right there. We're talking about training all day, every day at the WDC, right? So workforce development, right? And so you're on our board, and I've been talking to you and the other members of the board about our workforce resiliency initiative, trying to upskill our workforce in exactly these things, right? So giving us the skills to go out and compete or be competitive in a worldwide market. One of the things that happened just recently here in Hawaii that just shocked me, I mean, it just kind of emotional, was Love's Bakery. You know, that was... Yeah,
it's so sad.
Just sad, isn't it? Was it 100 years they've been around, or is it longer than that?
Over 100 years.
Oh, my goodness.
150 years nearly,
Yeah, so we've gone through all these wars, other like plagues or something, and this COVID-19 took them down. That was a huge, huge impact,
It was a big impact, and it's unfortunate. I think people... They loved their Love's bread, and you know, it really did, and it was an icon in Hawaii, and it's somebody everyone kind of grew up on, and for it to disappear basically overnight because of the pandemic is really a sad experience for all of us here in Hawaii. You know, they employed a little over 200 workers over there at Love's, and actually many of them were ILWU Local 142 members, the union that I work for today, and But why did they lose their, it's the pandemic. So what we saw was obviously the hotels were shut down. The convention center was shut down. We didn't have big weddings. We didn't have those type of things that were going on. So people weren't contracting. They weren't buying the bread and the buns and whatever large events. And so ultimately Love's wasn't able to sustain just basically bread and grocery stores. They relied on some of these big contracts with some of the hotels, with some of their vendors that weren't buying these products at this time. And so unfortunately they weren't able to survive. And so that's where we're at today. And so unfortunately 200 workers that were working there at Love's have lost their jobs. But thankfully to the WDC, the Workforce Development Council, you guys were able to come over here to the ILWU and help assist those 200 workers getting their unemployment claims filed, getting onto HireNet and working with them. And if it's okay if I jump in, Ka'ala, you're going to be offering, and I think I'm super excited by this, and I think it's exciting to see. I think many of them will be excited to learn it. But you're going to start providing digital literacy training to a number of these workers at Love's, and it's not just Love's; it's whoever else wants to be able to get provided by it. But I think it's awesome, and I think this is a type of training that a lot of these workers are going to need. For a lot of them at Love's and elsewhere too, they spent most of their career working at Love's. Many of them were there for 20, 30, or even 40 years. This was their life. That's the only job they know. That's the only training they know. So they may not know what they need in a new type of job moving forward. And I think that's what you're going to be able to provide, is that digital literacy training that many of them may be lacking for future employment. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah, can I just have you follow me around or come to my meetings and just talk about that project for me?
Yeah,
that is really one of the big pushes for us right now. And Love's Bakery, again, I grew up eating that bread. I actually grew up fishing with that bread too. It's like super good. Yeah, you're fishing for tilapia, which I hate to say. People are going to be unhappy about me wasting it. But that just, there was like some emotional responses coming up with that. So, you and I have been talking about this. I've been talking to your team at ILWU. Cassie we're meeting tomorrow to try and schedule some things. Our team at WDC was already meeting with them to help them make email addresses. And this is what we're talking about. It's not like they've never had to use an email. Like you said, they've been there for 20, 30 years or something. There's no need to use this tool. Like, I don't know how to use a chainsaw. I don't know how to, I want to, but I don't know how. And so part of it is helping them get kind of a new baseline of skills of what's happening right now in 2021. And then, and that's basic computer stuff, right? So being able to create your own email, left click, right click. We did a training a couple of weeks ago at Salt Lake Library. And one of the ladies left super excited because she found out that there was a wheel in the middle of her mouse. She was just like, what?
Wow.
And she never knew it. She said, I've never seen it. Did it just come up now? How'd you make that happen? I said, no. It's always been there. So we're trying to do that.
And I know that sounds...
Yeah.
Go ahead. And it probably sounds stunning to people that are watching us right now on YouTube, right? Yeah. Somebody doesn't know that they can click on their mouse. Somebody doesn't know how to create an email address. But it's real. It's out there. People don't understand it all the time. And because they didn't need to, right? They spent whatever it was, whatever job they may be, and that was the skill they needed. So they never felt the need to have to advance into a different skill. And I think that's where you're going to be able to provide it. I know for a lot of people that sounds confusing or it doesn't seem logical, but it's the reality. Yeah.
And shout out to the American Job Centers too. They're around the state, they're in every county, and they were doing this rapid response thing. I'm still kind of new to that, so kind of overwhelmed by how many moving pieces there are to help people like those who lost their job at Love's to find other employment, to find other skill training resources. So it's a big deal, and I mean, coming back, let me go all the way back to this idea of optimistic, pessimistic. Where are you at? Because again, 6 months ago, it was pretty dreary looking. It was some big gray clouds.
It was. So I was pessimistic. Well, we were pessimistic, or at least I was, and I know, and I might have made you a little depressed by it.
You did. I remember when you just like.
But we were at that point where there were so many people that lost their jobs. People were in a desperate situation. Unemployment insurance was overwhelmed with the amount of applicants that were applying at that time. People were waiting weeks, if not months, to get some payments, right, for unemployment.
Right.
And we weren't even sure if the vaccine at that time was even going to be available come December or January. People were talking about it's a possibility, but we weren't sure yet. They were trying to expand it and get to that point where we would have a vaccine. And so things looked grim. They really did look grim. And it was a matter of like, maybe this pandemic is going to last longer than many of us, right? And actually, at the start, some people had thought, oh, this pandemic, it hit in March, we'll be done with it by May or June, and then things are going to get back to better by that summer. And then that didn't happen, right? I mean, we went through these lockdowns and we went through a period of uncertainty for a very long time in the state of Hawaii and across the country, to be honest, and globally, because it's a global pandemic. And so I think people were very concerned, myself included, about what is Hawaii going to look like and what is our workforce going to look like if we can't get tourism back up and running, if we can't get the restaurant industry back, the hospitality industry back up and running, and other jobs that engage with customers, that engage with the public in person, right? What do we do about that if we have a virus that is destroying the economy and wreaking havoc on people and the economy? And so I was concerned. And then fast forward to December, fortunately, the vaccines did get developed, right? The Pfizer, the Moderna, we had, and then they were starting to get administered. And then we were able to roll it out a little bit quicker than I think people had suspected it would be able to do, to the point where now we're at, in the state of Hawaii, all islands, anyone 16 or older has the option of getting the vaccine. And fortunately, it seems like the vaccines are working, and it looks like a lot of people are willing to take the vaccine, which is a good thing. And so it's allowed the industries to reopen in Hawaii, which is positive. We need to get to that point. We couldn't sustain where we were at. Everyone was relying on government assistance, whether it was for unemployment insurance and the plus ups, whether it was if they were on MedQuest or the stimulus checks. But that is only a short-term solution. It's not a long-term solution. At some point, those benefits are going to run out. At some point, people were not going to be able to afford their rent. Well, they still can't afford their rent, but they couldn't afford other bills that they're going to pay. People are draining their savings account. People are draining their checking account, paying their bills on credit cards. This was the situation, and it's still, unfortunately, is a situation for some of the workforce in Hawaii today. But getting back to it, we were fortunate that we were able to get the vaccine rollout pretty quickly, at least in December, to the point where we are now. And people are feeling more comfortable getting out there. People are feeling more comfortable traveling. And we had the chance to see that we weren't sure what it was going to look like, but tourism numbers have improved steadily now ever since the vaccine rollout has been occurring, to the point where during the spring break levels in Hawaii, we had almost pre-pandemic levels of tourism coming back to Hawaii, even with them having to take a test, right? Even with them maybe having to quarantine, but people still want to come to Hawaii. So that, I think, is optimism. And eventually we're going to get to a vaccine passport where people can now travel more freely without the need of testing, without the need of quarantine. And of course, that's going to make sure more people do come into Hawaii, which is helpful because truthfully, I mean, Hawaii's economy needs help, right? And we need the spending, not just, we need it in tax collections, we need it in the businesses, we need to get people back to work. So that's the optimism side, right? And that, I think, is a good thing. And if you had asked me, like I said, if you had asked me back in like July, August of last year, I wasn't sure, and it was more doom and gloom, right? And I was depressed. I'll be honest, I was depressed. It was like, oh my God, this virus has gotten out of control, and unfortunately, it was like we had. And I'll be honest, I'll play the political card. We had a president that didn't take the virus seriously either, right? And so, and it created this huge political divide on like who took the virus seriously, who didn't take the virus seriously. You had this whole mask war that was happening, right? You still kind of have a mask war going on, but people didn't want to wear the mask. And so the virus got out of control in the United States when we could have handled it better. But now we are where we are. The vaccines have rolled out. People are a little bit more comfortable with where we're at. We're getting things to open up again, which is a good thing because the economy needs to help. But the reason I say pessimism is because we're just going back to what we were pre-pandemic. there's no changes that's happening in our economy other than we're just saying, let's just get back to where we were. But was where we were working? I'm not sure. I think you ask certain people, they're going to say it's not working, but it also depends on who you ask, right? Some people, the economy is working and they're doing just fine in Hawaii and they're okay with the direction Hawaii is going. But unfortunately, for the majority of the workforce in Hawaii, it's not doing well for them. And so we can go back to where we were in 2019, in 2018, before this pandemic hit. And yes, that means we're going to get people back to employed. We're going to get people back in the hotel industry. We're going to get people back in the restaurant industry. But you also take a note, and this is the concerning thing as well, too, is the hotels, as well as other businesses, they're hiring, but they're not hiring at the same amount of workforce that they had pre-pandemic. So what they found is they might be able to operate at a leaner base. They might be able to operate without as many employees. So and I mean, I'm not going to pick on one particular employer, but they may not need as big of a workforce, even though dealing with the exact same amount of customers, whether it's in that restaurant or whether it's in that hotel or wherever it may be. And so then the question is going to be, what happens to these workers? I don't know, 20, 30, 40,000 of them that were in the hotel industry that haven't gotten called back for employment because these hotels or restaurant or whatever industry it is doesn't feel the need that they need to call them back. They're still able to operate efficiently. They're still able to do their day-to-day operations at these hotels without that same workforce size. And so we now have these job losses that may not be coming back at all. And that's still a situation. And as you see, we're still better, but we're still at 9-10% unemployment rate in Hawaii, right? And obviously that number has been slowly decreasing as we've been talking about with the vaccine that's become more available, obviously with tourism numbers coming in Hawaii. But I don't think we're going to get back to the same level of employment that we had pre-pandemic, even though things will get slowly back to normal. So the question is going to be, where do those workers go that worked in the hotel or hospitality industry for 20 or 30 years? What jobs did they find? What will be available to them in Hawaii when that time comes and when they can find a job? And I'm not sure what that's going to look like. But I also say pessimism because many of these jobs, and we kind of mentioned this earlier on, but many of these jobs, and it's all subjective, right? We got to look at this at a subjective side, but these jobs are not like the highest paying jobs. They're rather low paying jobs. A lot of times in the service sector economy are lower paying jobs, and Hawaii is a service sector economy. We've been a service sector economy ever since pineapple and sugar and other industries left the state of Hawaii, and we turned into this completely tourism dominant industry, which is what Hawaii is today. And these jobs, whether they're paying $30,000 a year or $40,000 or $50,000 a year, unfortunately for the workforce, that's going to be hard to survive in the state of Hawaii. I mean, the DBEG came out with a study that says a worker needs to earn a minimum of $17.63 an hour, today's dollars. That number keeps going up. Just as a surviving wage, that's for one worker, an individual, right? As a surviving wage, that's about maybe $34,000, $35,000 a year, but that doesn't buy you a house, that doesn't buy you a condo, that gets you a studio apartment if you're lucky, right? That doesn't give you any kind of lavish lifestyle, but it gets you the ability just to survive in the state of Hawaii, barely though, just barely. So that's the situation that I think we have to figure out how we're going to figure out what Hawaii is going to look like. Is we're going to get workers back employed. We're going to get people working again in Hawaii at $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 a year. But is that enough to survive in the state of Hawaii? And my answer is no. Right?
Say the same thing. I don't think anybody is going to dispute that.
No. And so that's where the pessimism is for long term, right? Because yes, it's great that we got the vaccine, and it exceeded my expectations, which is a good thing, right? It's great that we're able to soon adopt the vaccine passport program. All of this is good for the state of Hawaii because it's going to help get our economy back on track. But our economy back on track still doesn't necessarily help the people who have been struggling or are currently struggling, right? And that's what we got to look at. And like I said, some of these workers can go into the construction industry, which is wonderful. And that's where I think we take a look at, trying to guide some students or some younger people, or even people who had a career in the hospitality industry, maybe guide them into the construction industry, which obviously, as we know, pays great wages in the state of Hawaii. Especially if you're one of the union employment opportunities in the construction industry, you could be looking at $30 or $40 an hour in this industry, and
Right.
and again, even that could be paycheck to paycheck in Hawaii, but it's still better, right?
It's true. It's true. And this is a kind of a crazy thing, because if you were living in, someplace in the States and the continent, that's not a bad wage, but here, like you said, $80,000 a year and you're living paycheck to paycheck. It's just such a crazy thing. We didn't even talk about automation, AI, which is already happening and changing work as we know it going forward. Even before COVID-19, right? So there's jobs that are not going to exist anymore, not just because of COVID-19, but because of they're going to be done. There's a McDonald's in Kahala that has I don't even have to talk to anybody. I can just put my order right here in a little kiosk, and I'm done. So I'm trying to imagine a future here where, like you're talking about, trying to challenge me, I think, and everybody else, is what do we want Hawaii to look like? What does the future look like 10 years from now? And that's vision to me. That's a leadership question. If you don't have vision, that old proverb, people perish. And I think that's what we're looking at here. And if we can't get consensus on the vision, then we're kind of done. So, automation, AI, machine learning, whatever it is, changing things, global trends, the mega trends that are affecting just the world around us, and COVID-19. One of the things that you mentioned too was this idea of getting back to what we used to be. And I'm not a football player. My son wanted to play football and he wanted to be quarterback. And so I had to outsource somebody to teach him how to throw a football. Okay, but I know this, that when the ball is fumbled, and it's a good thing if you can recover it in a forward recovery. You gain a couple yards. You drop the ball, but you gain a couple yards. And I think that would be my hope for Hawaii, that, there's been some, not our fault, COVID-19, but there's a fumble. No. There's some things we've been stumbling. And if we can get a little forward recovery here, that's not bad. Get a little bit ahead or above, resiliency, bounce not just back to where you were, but above. So post-traumatic growth, I think, is what I'm hoping for. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned AI, because many companies are starting to adopt that approach, right? And when you're looking at it, just like you said, the McDonald's in Kahala, and they're elsewhere too. Not just McDonald's. There's Taco Bells that are going to be opening up that are going to be strictly digital without any workforce in them at all. So you're going to go to a Taco Bell and go to a kiosk or whatever it is and buy your and maybe there's some cooks in the back, but that's it, right? The front of the house or whatever it is going to be all digital. And that's also going to happen in the hospitality industry. It happens in the restaurant industry. And so when that starts to become more dominant, that situation where these employers start utilizing more artificial intelligence, whatever that looks like, it means also less workforce, right?
Yeah.
Particular jobs. And we will experience that because in the service sector economy, many of them are moving towards that artificial intelligence type of approach. And those jobs disappear.
Yeah. So I know I'm running out of time here, and I've taken up a whole bunch of your time, but real quick on UBI, universal basic income. I'm telling people now that I'm a post-workist, so like work is old-fashioned, and the training that I'm trying to do is not necessarily for jobs, but it's for cash flow. So do you think that UBI is a possibility, or is that something that we should be entertaining?
I think it's something that will probably be necessary moving forward. The question is how. I mean, everyone's going to say, how do we afford it, right? Mm-hmm. But if cost of living continues to go up, which is the direction that it has been for decades now, and if housing keeps going up, but jobs that exist are remaining stagnant in terms of wage growth, right? Or they're not rising at the same level of cost of living, which is generally the case for many of these service sector industry jobs. The question is going to be, how do these workers survive with that type of income that they're receiving. And so UBI, Universal Basic Income, obviously Andrew Yang was a huge proponent of that when he was running for president, may be something that's going to help keep some of this workforce afloat. Because when we take a look at the economy, and here's the thing that I think people need to recognize, the way our economy is structured, it's the consumer spending driven economy, right? So for our economy to succeed, people need to be able to spend back into the economy, and then that ultimately helps out the businesses all across the island, many of them anyways. But if workers don't have enough spending capital, they're not going to be spending back into the economy, which ultimately hurts many of the employers in the state of Hawaii. And so UBI will hopefully be able to give them the extra spending power to be able to spend in the economy, but ultimately be able to just to survive, right? Be able to afford their rent or be able to afford the mortgage or whatever payments they have. So I think that's a direction we're going to have to go, is if in fact wages are not going to be able to rise at the level of cost of living, right? Which is rising much faster than, the wage growth for many of these jobs that currently exist.
All right. I know I threw that curveball at you in terms of the question, but I feel like I'm in a college class here, and you're giving me like a whole, this is fantastic, helping me to understand a little bit of the big picture. We're about done out of time. I've been asking you tons of questions, and any questions for me? Like you want to ask me a question? I didn't go to Kalaheo. I grew up in Kailua though.
No. So which high school did you go to?
I did go to Kamehameha High School.
Kamehameha. Okay, that's fine. Right. That's fine. Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Hey, for me, it's go OIA, right? So.
Okay. There's some OIA guys that beat me once in a while.
Yeah, no, of course. But I just want to say thank you for this opportunity, and also thanks for providing the education training programs to the workforce that needs, especially the digital literacy training. I think that's something that is going to be exciting. I think many and I think that'll be helpful to be able to train our workforce, because it's definitely going to be needed.
Yeah, great. So thank you for asking me what high school I went to, and for your graciousness when I didn't say Kalaheo. And so let me just close this out over here and bring this back to where we are now. We're just ending up our live stream with Jason Bradshaw from the ILWU. I actually misspelled that earlier. This is crazy. So we're trying to get some live streams with people that I've spoken to over the last year that has been super educational and challenging. And so even from this live stream here, I'm thinking about what is the vision for Hawaii's future? What is that future alternative state? What do we want Hawaii to look like? We have that kind of question that we have to entertain. People have to address it. People have to talk about it. The other thing is that we are doing the WDC here. We are doing a basic computer upskilling, partnering with the state libraries in computer upskilling, digital literacy, partnering with the libraries, the UH community colleges, Hawaii Literacy. Everybody's working together around the state here to try and offer these free in-person trainings at the libraries and the community colleges. And so that's available. We're about to launch that April 30th. Stay tuned. Pay attention to that. Also, we have a couple of these future live streams coming up. So all the fun people I've been speaking to over the last year, April's coming up in just a couple of days. She is the training coordinator for Hawaii Carpenters Apprenticeship and Training group there, and fantastic, great story there, talking about what carpentry construction looks like, getting some of her perspective. This other guy, Chris Berger, April 27th, is the only guy I know, and I gotta bring you back on this to thinking about where we're looking at now, but he's the only guy I know that has a digital literacy rap song, like a legit rap. He grew up in San Francisco rap back in the day, Tupac, Digital Underground, for any of you guys who pay attention. But he's coming up, and then Bert Lum is going to close out our close out our live stream, month of April. And he is sort of if James Brown is the godfather of funk, Bert Lum is the godfather here of the broadband and digital, all things digital, all kinds of things happening, going on for us. And so thank you so much. If you're watching this later in the recording, feel free to drop in the comments questions, and we'll address those as we go. But other than that, thank you very much for joining me. Have a great rest of your day. April 19th, if you don't have your vaccine, go get it. And this is also a happy birthday shout out to my wife, April 19th. I did not forget. And we're going to have a great dinner tonight. So thank you very much, all of you. Aloha, hui ho, malama pono.